leaders have to make difficult decisions, and difficult decisions require courage, because you won't make everyone happy. And sometimes you're going to make some people really unhappy, but you have to make the decision one way or the other. And so my very first trip to Africa with World Vision was to Rakai, Uganda. And here I was, this, white male CEO who had had a very successful career. I'd never been to Africa. I knew very little about poverty. I was leading a pretty sheltered life, to be honest, living in the American bubble. And so I think World Vision kind of understood this. And so as quickly as they could, I think it was within 60 days, they put me on an airplane to Uganda, complete with a film crew to accompany me to capture every emotion and tear and breakdown that I had. And they wanted to expose me to really terrible poverty and suffering. It was almost my baptism of fire into the job. And so Rakai, Uganda, has been called ground zero of the AIDS pandemic. And they took me to the home of 3 little boys. I think they were like, 12, 11, and 8. They lost both of their parents to AIDS. And right out in front of their little mud hut were the 2 graves, 2 piles of stone that marked where their mother and father were buried. And this little boy, who was 12 or 13, he was now the parent of his younger brothers, and they lived completely alone. Imagine leaving 3 children of that age alone without parents to fend for themselves. And not just to fend for themselves, but no social safety net. They weren't living in a house with heating and air conditioning and running water. And they were in a thatch hut where, when it was hot, it was hot. When it was dark, it was dark. There was no electricity. There's no running water. And I just felt like it was a punch in the gut. I was so broken to see this. And then they told me that just in Rakai, which is the size of a county, there were 13,000 children like this, 13,000. And in Africa, there were 13 million orphans because of AIDS. Because you see what AIDS was doing in Africa, in the United States, it was known as a disease of the gay community. In Africa, it was a disease of the heterosexual community, and it was being spread heterosexually, mostly by husbands who were wandering from their marriages, and then they would bring it home to their wives. And then the women would often give birth to an HIV positive infant. So it was this terrible cycle. And then the father would die, and then the mother would die. And then you got the children left behind, and some of them might have been HIV positive, not always, but some of them might have been. And you had a whole generation of grandparents caring for their grandchildren because there was no one left. And in fact, I even make great-grandparents that had lost both children and both grandchildren, and were now caring for the great-grandchildren.
Oh my gosh.
And so I came back to the United States like sick to my stomach, and I basically got my team together, and I said, we've got to do something. I know I'm the new guy. I know I was selling fine china 2 months ago, but this, I never knew about this. We've got to tell people about this. I don't think people understand what's happening here. And I got those awkward glances around the room as the senior leaders at World Vision were kind of saying, should you tell them, or do you want me to tell them? Somebody better tell them. And I said, okay. I read the body language. I said, what are you wanting to say here? I mean, what have I gotten wrong? And one of the guys said, Rich, we are a G-rated ministry, and this is an R-rated issue. And if we go after HIV and AIDS, we will lose our donors, our child sponsors, our church partners, because AIDS is a disease that is stigmatized in the United States. It's part of the culture war. And I don't think people will give to it, so we can't go there, And we had a longer discussion about it. And I finally said, and this was, I guess, the courage part. I said, you know what? Those people and those church partners are wrong. And if we don't tell them they're wrong, who will?